Hello to all of our friends here in the Parent Tween Village. I'm super excited that we have Michelle Steiner with us from Michelle's Mission. We just had an amazing conversation about helping to support students who navigate life with disabilities. And in this portion of our conversation, exclusively for Parent Tween Village, we're talking about what Michelle calls Advocacy 101. So we're going to start from the basis. So what do you mean when you say advocate? I think a lot of us have an understanding of it, but what's your definition?
My definition of advocacy is being able to state what you need and being able to state those needs, and also being able for somebody else to state the needs on somebody else's behalf. A parent and or a child, anybody can be an advocate.
Got it. And so now we're taking this specifically into life in the school system.
Yes.
And I know you navigated this as a student, and you are also now in the classroom as a paraprofessional. And so you've seen it from that side of things as well. And I can say from my perspective, having worked with a lot of families over the years,
Mhm.
schools can sometimes be difficult to navigate in terms of being able to, number one, for a parent even to know what the needs are, to be able to
Right.
articulate them, and then to be able to fight to get them for the kids.
Exactly.
So, how do we even know, again, starting from the very, very beginning, how do we know what to ask for in the first place? How do we know what those needs are?
I think a lot of what asking is looking at what your child does need. Like, where are they struggling at? What can you see at home that the child might be struggling? And I also think it's talking with your child's teacher. I'm sure once a lot of times they get diagnosed, your teacher will have some ideas of some areas that they need some support. A lot of times it's academics, but there can also be other areas that you might be concerned with, and the school can help support that too. And I think it's just identifying what the need is and being able to find some solutions and resources to be able to help you.
So I'm also going to add in, there are folks out there, you had mentioned in the first portion of our
Hmm.
conversation that you had worked with somebody obviously who evaluated you to identify your learning
Yes.
disability. And a
Hmm.
lot of families think that the schools are the only place that they can go for that kind of support. And I just want to add
Right.
in that there are actually independent education advocates. There
Yes.
are independent evaluators or
Hmm.
assessors. I have several in my community at Parent Tween Connection. So if you find
Right.
yourself in this situation or you need this kind of a referral, um, finding somebody like that, oftentimes you can get referred to them by a pediatrician, but I know a lot of times pediatricians don't necessarily know who these folks are.
Right.
And so finding an independent education advocate who really truly is working on your behalf can also be a really good step to take. And I'm not saying that schools aren't working on students' behalves, but students or schools definitely have competing priorities, put it that way, in certain cases.
Exactly. And it's great to have another resource too, and sometimes another set of eyes. Sometimes, someone that's an independent one might be able to see something that the school could be doing and that they're not, and that just gives another resource and some great ideas.
Well, and oftentimes, I don't mean this in any disrespect to teachers,
Yeah.
but teachers are not diagnosticians, just like
Right.
doctors are not shoe salespeople,
Yeah.
right? And so
Exactly.
it's
Yep.
not necessarily in their scope of experience as a teacher to
Right.
say, hey, here's what I
Right.
think is going on. In fact, it would be unethical for them to try to diagnose when they don't
Yeah.
have the skill to do it.
Exactly. I agree 100%.
So once we've got an evaluation, a psychologist, an
Mhm.
educational advisor, or advocate, somebody like that, and we've got a diagnosis, and they tell us, okay, your kiddo has a limitation in math, or your kiddo's navigating difficulty, like with dyslexia or
Mhm.
other, ADHD, autism type of situations. Oftentimes, those folks, the independent advocates or the evaluators, can say, look, here are the types of resources that you should ask for,
Right.
and then it's on the family then to go in and have this conversation with the school to say, "Hey, here's
Yes.
what we need to ask for."
Right. Exactly.
Um,
I mean, yeah.
so what do you remember from your experience of those conversations when you were a kid? Were you ever a part of those conversations to watch your parents advocate for you?
I was not able to go to the IEP meetings. At that time, children did not attend their IEP meetings like they do now. But my
Okay.
parents did advocate for me. They would say, "Oh, we have your IEP meeting coming up. Is there anything you want us to talk about?" And I would
Okay.
get to say, "Oh, I want to study this when I go to college. How much math is that going to have?" And my
Right.
parents would bring that up and they would be honest with me and say, "Okay, you're going to have to take this class or that one." And they brought up a lot of those concerns for me. So I think that was really, that was my experience. And then when I became an adult, I had to be the one that was going to advocate for myself whenever I went
Sure.
to a lot of those things. So I think that was really during, that was my experience with that. But I also was pretty passionate about speaking my mind, though I may not have been able to go to the meetings, but I can remember I had a learning support teacher who didn't think I could handle college because of the math, and I was nervous myself, and she pushed vocational training school on me. And there was nothing there that interested me. And I was pretty vocal about that. There was also a job training program that I didn't want to do, and I told her that, and I found my own job uh, that summer. So I may not have been able to go to the meetings, but I could definitely speak up with what was on my mind, and I give a lot of the credit to my parents.
Sure. So before we get to
Mhm.
the point that we want to make about helping kids learn to advocate for themselves,
Yeah.
because not everybody is like you and has a likelihood or a propensity toward advocating for themselves or have parents that support it. If we're going into IEP meetings or 504 meetings and such, and we're advocating, how
Mhm.
frequently would you recommend, again from your lived experience, but also as a paraprofessional? What do you see in terms of how regularly parents need to be following up on the supports that students are supposed to be getting?
I would tell a parent to definitely follow up if they have a concern. But I would also tell them to kind of do it with thinking about that though. If they maybe giving them a chance, maybe you could say at the beginning of the year, these are my concerns, and then just play out with the resolution, see how things are working, talk with your child, see how that is. And there's always that checking in and just saying, hey, I just wanted to see how things are going. I think that's really important to have that regular communication with families and teachers and other professionals. I can remember I got to meet my very first, I got to see her again, one of my very first learning support teachers. And I got to thank her a couple years ago. My mom said, "Oh yeah, she was one of my favorites because she really worked on your behalf." And I remember the teacher said, "Oh yeah, I would I would call your mom if I had a concern, and your mom would call me if she had one, and we worked together on how to help you." So I think it's that working together and just going and talking about your concerns.
Mhm. And so I actually want to take a minute and I want to give a shout out to a conversation that we had with Michelle Steiner Trovato. It's up on our YouTube, it's in our podcast history as well. She is the parent of a kiddo who has profound disabilities and profound challenges, like to the extent that he will never be able to live independently and such. And so the conversation that we had is probably about a year ago was about how to be an ally with your school, with your kiddo's school.
Mhm.
And I like the fact that you're saying, if you come at it as a team, you know, hey, teacher calls parent, parent calls teacher, not from an accusatory fashion, but like, I just want to check in. Do you think that families should be doing that like on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis, monthly, or is that really dependent on what's appropriate for the kiddo?
I think it's what's appropriate for the kiddo. You
Okay.
might have situations where you might have to contact them weekly. There might be times where it might be monthly, and sometimes it might just be every couple of months. You just might want to check in, or as a concern comes up. I think it's just, it totally depends on the child, depends on the situation, and what supports are in place.
And I think the bottom line here is that this isn't a set it and forget it situation.
Yeah,
This is a
exactly.
team effort. And
Hmm.
at the end of the day, the parents that we're speaking to, your kid is your main priority. And it's
Yep.
not to say that their kids aren't a priority at school, but our teachers and our paraprofessionals and our support teachers are serving multiple students, not
Yes.
only yours. So really making sure that that responsibility comes back on us in the family. So, okay. So then to the point of helping our kids learn to advocate for themselves.
Huh?
I know you said you kind of just had the propensity of like, I just had a tendency to speak my mind. Um, I would have liked to have that propensity. I was not encouraged by my mother. I'll put it that way. So, what do you recommend to families as they're navigating this? Because to your point, when your kiddo goes off to college, they're going to have to advocate for themselves. Or if they go and get a job, they're going to have to advocate for themselves. How do we guide them to do that?
I think one of the first things is I try to teach advocacy skills with my students. I can remember last year I had a student that was really afraid to go up to a teacher and ask them for help. And she was really struggling. We have a great staff that will come in during their plan periods and help students out and learning support. And she goes, I'm afraid he's going to get mad at me. I said, well, I'll go with you. I'll show you how. And that student, she went up to him and we asked for help. She got the support that she needed, and she wasn't afraid to do that anymore. So I think that's really important that parents have that where they're able to do, or students, they learn how to do a lot of those skills. They learn how to ask for help in an appropriate way and to go up and say, I don't understand this. Can you please explain this? Or I didn't quite get that. And sometimes we might even have a student that might be the exception. We have some that are really reading is a struggle for them. And I can remember there was one, he had to do a presentation for a class and he was excused from it, but the teacher couldn't call it out in front of everybody. And he comes in and he's like, I have to do this presentation. He said, I have to do it. Everybody has to do it. And we said, well, no, you don't. If you're having an issue with that or you have a question, ask your teacher after class.
Mhm. So, a lot of students, because of the perceived authority with teachers, right?
Uh-huh.
They feel intimidated by teachers. Do you find that it's helpful for them to actually like write out or pre-plan what they want to say before they go up? Is that a skill that you teach them to do?
So we haven't gone to the writing or the pre-planning, but that is a great one to do too, because sometimes you may not know what you want to say, or you might may not think about that, and you want to be prepared. So that definitely is a good one as well, especially with emailing. That's really important too.
Sure. Well, and these days with email, it's a really good way to let students advocate is to
Uh-huh.
let them be the ones sending the emails. But
Right.
then CC mom and dad or guardian
Right.
or whoever, right? Whoever
Yeah.
the support team is, keep everybody included in the conversation, but having it come from the student, they can draft it. And then
Right.
before you actually click send, be like, hey, let me come read it with you and make sure that we're actually on the right track before you hit send.
Right. Exactly.
What other can you give us another skill or two that parents can support their kids in developing in terms of advocating for themselves? So number one, going up and asking for help, maybe walking next to them as they go up and ask for help. But I think the key there is letting them be the ones to ask.
Yes. I think it's key to let them ask, but I also think it's encouraging them to research different kinds of resources that are out there. Let's say you have a student that wants to go to college. That's definitely a dream, but look for colleges that have accommodations. Have them look for that. Have them see what's important to them, and give them that space. With definitely supporting them and giving them the space to reach out to different places. I can
Mhm,
remember we went to a college fair for students that had disabilities, and that was really important. My parents had me talk to the representatives and ask questions. I think that was important. But my mom and dad were right there to support me along with that.
mhm,
And I think it's just looking at those things that are out there. And I think parents can also find what their child is good at and also just being able to put them into those resources. I know for me, I knew I liked to write, but I didn't want to join the writing groups at school because I had a lot of problems with some of the people I was with. So I
sure.
went into the community and found a writing group. But there's also a lot of other things they can do: dance, sports, a lot of other after school things, church activities if they're into that, theater. And I think it's getting into those. And I don't always recommend doing the school. I mean, that's a good first step, but there could be some other resources in the community. And that child gets a chance to shed that reputation that they've had and they get to shine in what they're
Mhm.
good at.
Another thought that just came up to me is an opportunity where the child can be mentoring or supporting younger kids could also
Yes.
be really empowering, especially if whether we're talking like emotional delays, psychological
Mhm.
delays, or curricular, academic challenges that they're navigating. If they're already in a position where they're feeling less than in some fashion,
Okay.
putting them in a position where there is going to be a perceived experience compared to the folks that they're working with could also be really helpful for them, you think?
Like, I remember I loved working with younger children. I worked at my brother's daycare that was my first job I had as a teenager. And it was great being able to mentor younger children. Some of them had disabilities, but some of them didn't. But that really made me feel empowered, and it gave me a lot of experience that I was able to take with me at the job that I have now.
That's awesome. All right. So we've talked about basically defining advocacy,
Hmm.
finding resources, the kinds of resources we can go to find what would help our kiddos, that research, and then
Yeah,
encouraging them as they age up, not only to speak on their own behalf, but maybe some pre planning about how to speak, maybe even role playing. And
yeah.
then also doing some research for themselves as they get older about places where they would feel comfortable and resources that exist for them. And my goodness, that is so much easier now than it was
Oh, yeah.
20 years ago, thanks to the, interwebs and such. So, do you have
Right.
any parting words for families as we wrap up today?
I would just tell them not to give up on their kids. My parents didn't give up on me, and they encouraged me and were really honest with me. And I think that's what caused me to be the success that I am today.
That's fantastic. And folks can find you at michellesmission.net. I got it
Yes.
right this time.
Yay.
um, you write a lot about life with disabilities. And that's also where folks can find your photography.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. All right, Michelle, thank you so very much for your time
Thank
and your
you.
insight, your support for so many families.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everybody.